one of the things that I recently learned, and I'm still struggling with, is the proper way to do gain staging for drums. When I'm what I understand is, and perhaps this is where the problem is. My understanding is I must isolate drums, mute everything else, all the other instruments, which are bass, synths, guitars, and some sonic ambient effects, if you will. I mute everything else. Check for levels. Peaks are looking good. Peak level is maybe -5, -6 dBFS. RMS is well, healthy -12-ish. So that looks good mathematically speaking. But when I enable all the other instruments, that's when and I guess you've already understood the problem. That's when I find that the drums are becoming a bit more inaudible. So any tips on that? And I guess the second part of the question is somewhere in that signal chain, not just for drums, but for all the other instruments, there are a little bit of compression going on. There's a little bit of EQ going on at the input side when I'm recording. So should I gain stage with the compressor and the EQ enabled, or should I disable them at the time I'm recording, as in imagine playing a lick at the input side? Or should I disable them at the input side and come back to them in the mixing phase? Sorry if I'm too many things in a question. Sorry. Thanks.
No, Vivi, that's you're first of all, you're biting off a lot, but that's a sandwich that few engineers can avoid taking a bite out of these days. I mean, that's the way we do things. So I understand. So I think I can get to both your questions. The first about the second question, I'll answer first. Sure. I try to encourage my students to commit to their sounds as soon as possible. So if you like the sound of an EQ and a compressor, don't wait till later to make that a part of the story. The one thing that never ceases to amaze me is the power of option paralysis. Do I do it this way? Do I do it that way? They both sound good, but what do I want? And the thing that I think my students tell me they end up learning after they're done with my being tortured by my courses is that they're really just learning how to know before they start what they want.
Right.
And that's a level of maturity that comes from the self-confidence gathered by doing it a lot. And you kind of learn that, like, I would challenge most mix engineers out there or recording engineers to say, like, of the plugins that you just put on your tracks, how often do you just commit them versus just let them just stay up there all the time as just real-time processing threads? And once you get a sound that you like, most people won't touch it again,
Right.
And that if you think about it from a logistics standpoint, there's a lot of value in then just committing. Just commit to the sound, move on, use those resources for the next thing. Everyone's afraid of doing something wrong or breaking something somehow. But the thing that creative people need to learn is that there is always the element of risk involved, and if there isn't, you're not really being creative. You're not taking any chances, and you have to go there. If you fuck it up and it's the worst thing ever, either everything else around it changes to make it not such a bad thing, or you have a chance to redo it again and it comes out even better the second time.
Yeah.
So that's my advice for the second part of your question.
Right.
The first part of your question was about, soloing things to check for loudness.
Yeah.
So the perfect mix is when everyone's part is louder than everyone else's part. So how do you do that? And the thing I would avoid doing is as a mix engineer, when you're starting, is I try not to stay in one instrument group when I'm setting my initial levels. And I don't use the solo button to isolate instruments unless I'm looking for a specific problem within those instruments. If there's a squeak in the kick drum pedal that I need to find, okay, I'll use the solo button to find which kick drum track has the squeak, But I don't want to listen to the kick drum to listen to what the kick drum sounds like, because that's only one part of what the kick drum sounds like in the amalgam of everything else.
Right.
So the way I build my mixes is I start with a triangle, really, like a kick, bass, vocal. and I'll set the level of my kick drum to where I think it should be, and then I'll set the level of where the bass complements the kick drum and the low end is kind of consistent. And
Right.
then I'll set the vocal level to where I feel like the vocal is just as loud as the kick drum is, or maybe a little bit louder, but all three of those things need to be equally heard. And then when I feel like I've gotten to that point, then I'll start adding in other instruments and pulling up other faders. But I won't go back and change those three. Once those are set, that's it. That's the foundation.
Okay.
And when I do it that way, as I fill in the rest of the drum kit, as long as that kick is balanced against my vocal, then if I bring up the snare to where it balances against the kick, and they feel like they're similar in level, and I've looked at the frequencies and it's all kind of feeling the same,
Hmm.
then I know I'm also not bothering the vocal, because what was working for the kick was working for the vocal. And if I add the snare, the vocal should stay consistent with the kick. And then as I add more and more instruments up and add more and more faders, I'm adding through the mix, rather than taking away. So I'll keep the bass there and I'll keep the vocal there. And I'm just adding other tracks, throwing up other faders till they fit within those three. And then once I'm done with the drums, I'll move outside of the drums and start doing rhythm guitars. And then I'll go from rhythm guitars to pianos or whatever else it is, other harmonic stuff, synths, keys, auxiliary percussion, what have you.
Right.
At the end, I haven't used. I'm instead of using the solo button, I've just moved all my faders to nothing, like just pulled them down,
Yeah.
and I'm pulling them up to find the right levels rather than soloing them. It becomes additive synthesis, and at the end, I get something that feels good. Nothing is louder than the kick, bass, and vocal because I've set those levels first, right? And so then if I have to make a slight adjustment to any one of those little ones in the middle, I can, but I don't have to hit this. I don't use the solo button to find those problems. I use my intuitive sense as I build my way up from the basics.
I see. Yeah, which is quite reassuring, honestly, because um, to be very honest, I'm so new to all of these things
Mm-hmm.
that I, beyond the point, apart from the lessons from Audio University and just one more YouTube channel, because I know it's a rabbit hole, so I only stick to one or two teachers, if you will, and for the rest of it, I just, like you were saying, consistently put in the hours every single day. I was telling
Mm-hmm.
Kyle saying that I try to spend at least 4 hours a day, 4 to 5 hours. So that's why I'm, using my ears more than anything else.
Good.
So just sticking to one or two teachers, and then really just using my ears, and not so much the faders, but the feel of the song and sort of the vision for the song, if you will. What
Yeah.
is the emotional theme that I'm trying to convey?
Yes.
So I learned about gain staging. The reason I say that is because I learned about gain staging. I knew about the concept, but I really learned and applied myself to understand what the heck it is. Only about a week or so
Mm.
ago,
Mm.
and very quickly, what I realized was, hey, somehow I seem to have been doing accidentally, completely accidentally, what you were saying of mute everything down, start with the drums, and then slowly bring everything up, and your ears will guide you more than anything else. They will tell you, hey, is everything sounding, generally speaking, is everything sounding good? I try to use quickly switch between my headphones that I'm using for composing or recording, and then AirPods. Some occasionally I listen on the phone or in the car, so that gives me some reference of, yeah, okay, this is decently good enough, and let's move on. And yeah, so looks like I think the answer to how do I gain stage for drums is start with the kick, keep the bass in mind, and indulge in a little more additive synthesis, like you said, instead of
Yep.
isolating something. Yeah.
Yeah. Start with the kick, add the bass, and add the vocal.
Mhm.
Those three things together.
Interestingly, I do not have vocals in the songs as of
Mm.
today. This is mostly going to be, I think, an instrumental album.
Well, then whatever the lead instrument is,
Right,
Yeah.
right,
that takes the place of the vocal. Yeah.
And I
right.
think in live sound,
Yeah,
I always started with the vocal. right? I think that if you start with the kick in live sound, you end up having a really loud kick, and then nothing can compete.
Yeah.
But like
Like,
starting with the lead, the soloist, whatever it
Right.
is, I think makes a lot of sense. I want to say something real quick.
yeah, sure.
I think that gain staging is like, it's so confusing when it's such a basic thing. Like I think Vivi, you've been doing gain staging. I mean, if you
Yeah.
weren't doing gain
Yeah.
staging, you wouldn't have heard anything come out of your speakers, you know.
Yeah.
But the problem is, I think so many people say gain stage, it's all about gain staging, and then you've got like Andrew Shep saying I don't gain stage at all. Well, it's like everything is gain staging in a way. And I think though that the difference between the importance of paying attention to gain staging in the 70s is much different. While it's still important, it's much different now, don't you
Yeah.
think, Gabe? Because like now I think there's maybe like one really, really detrimental gain staging rule that exists today, which is that on the way in, when you're converting from analog to digital, if you go over 0 dB FS, that's going to be pretty extreme, right? So like you want to make sure you don't clip. Whereas
Right.
in the tape
Yeah.
days, as you approached the upper limits, you would start to hear artifacts. Whereas in digital, it's like you could be at -20, you could be at -1, and I think it'll sound very similar. There's noise on the other end of that, so you don't want to be coming in with your drums at -90, you know, or else there will be a lot of noise. But if you can get a relatively good input signal,
Right.
then I think that you kind of avoid that to some degree. And then within the DAW, it's often a floating point structure to where if you do break some of those gain staging rules, or if you overlook a gain staging, either going above 0 dB or being considerably below it, the DAW will kind of adapt for you to where, you know, it's best practice, which is why I still teach gain staging on the channel, to pay attention to each stage where there's a meter and where there's anything happening to the gain. But I think that the repercussions of improper gain staging or imperfect gain staging are much less severe than they used to be. What do you think, Gabe? You seem doubtful. Help
Yeah.
us understand what you're thinking.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I would go there. I see what you're saying, and I don't disagree in the way you're presenting it. But I still see gain staging as being critical to audio production. But I think there's some nuance there that's missed sometimes, which is that in the 70s, everything was more or less VU meters. We didn't really use PPM meters to measure things. And the thing that's different about VU meters is that there's a whole lot of harmonic distortion that's based around. Like there's no such thing as clipping in an analog device. You can max it out and distort it, where you hit maximum distortion and saturation. But you're not like we don't have digital clipping the way we have digital clipping in audio systems now. But what that meant was that as you got closer to that spot where the meter turns from black to red, and you go past that zero line, 0 to +3 or +6 or +12, depending on the system, was how much harmonic saturation distortion you were adding to the signal beyond what you started with. Yeah, the signal was louder, but gain staging is not just about loudness. It's about saturation. And that hasn't changed. So when Andrew Shep says he doesn't do gain staging, I don't know what he's talking about, because of course he does. He sells a plugin that's all about saturation. So how could you not, like, you and that's the thing that people with a sophisticated understanding of gain staging utilize in a mix, is that you're choosing certain tools and you're driving them in a certain way, and you know that the harder you drive them, the more harmonic saturation they're going to give back, which is EQ, compression, and all wrapped up in one, really. So there is gain staging in how much signal can we measure, but there's also the difference of like, well, what is the importance of that? There's a difference between gonzo gain structuring, which is something that Dave Moulton talks about in his book Total Recording, where he gives you if I shout at 120 decibels and I have a microphone with a sensitivity of such and such at 6 feet away, what is, he can calculate how loud the voltage will be, in the microphone, and then we could take that and plug it into a line level input, and and say, well, then what will the signal be at line level, and then what will the signal be down here? And you can mathematically calculate predictively what the level will be all the way down a signal chain, and that is gain staging, and that you're thinking about that. But there's a different part of that, which is the intuitive, creative sense of gain staging, which is what is the impact of those choices that we make along the way.
Right.
Is it to try to keep it from being changed? Is it going to be exactly the same as it was when it starts to when it ends? Or are we doing this on purpose? Are we purposely pushing the level to get the thing to go beyond unity so that it breaks up or distorts? There we go with another one of those.
You do
I
a
guess
lot
it's
of
my
this,
thumb.
I think. Yeah.
I do a lot of this. I got good thumbs. I'm my own best supporter. So, but as we push these things harder, like the 1073 preamp is a great example. Like that's one where you can drive that circuit, and the harder you drive it, the more harmonic saturation it gives back. That's different than just how loud it is. But
Right.
also, we typically, as we saturate the 1073 plugin, we'll pull back the output gain, right, which is gain staging, so that that harmonic saturation carries forward to the next device without it clipping, which is, I think,
Mm.
what you're talking about, Kyle, which is the measurement, right, of it.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not to say that you wouldn't put an EQ after it to undo some of the harmonic saturation bits if you found them unpleasing. That's also gain staging. There's just a lot of nuance in that concept that is not just about how loud something is, it's how the system reacts to it in the aggregate.
Yeah.
And that's where learning about not just the gain stage of a mixer is important, but the individual components that you might be tying in. And there's, even though we do record just about everything in the box now, there's a lot of outboard equipment that we still integrate into that, or plugins that simulate
Right.
old
And that's it.
analog
I was, I think,
systems.
thinking strictly linear plugins, which means, you know, it'll behave exactly the same independent of the input level, whereas an analog piece of gear doesn't do that. Like I was saying, a tape
Doesn't do it.
machine will start to saturate far before the, you know, zero on the VU meter, right?
Yeah.
And like
Right.
any compressor the same way, any analog EQ really the same way, right? But not only that, there are plugins made that are completely digital that emulate that behavior, and that really complicates the gain staging conversation, doesn't it?
It does, because it also it's very hard to measure what the loudness is in front of a plugin, especially if you're in like an insert chain in Pro Tools, especially bad. But you know, to have meters at every stage to know what the output signal is, or the level of the output and the input level. I would love if Pro Tools gave you a little meter on the input and output of every plugin, so you could see like how
Right.
much gain change there actually is. They don't. So you know, you have to be able to intuit that. And I see that being a problem. A lot of my students will boost like 5 different filters in an EQ, and then feed it to a compressor, and that compressor's super reactive, not realizing that because they boosted so much of the EQ, that's causing the compressor's threshold to tack way harder than it would otherwise if they just backed off the output gain of the EQ so that it was passing, you know. So all of this stuff is part of gain staging.
Right. Yeah, thankfully, I've been using Ableton Live
Mhm.
since day one, so I'm very comfortable with that. And thankfully, they have what you were talking about of sort of visual markers of your levels
Mhm.
at the input and the output of each plugin. What complicates my setup further is I have actual hardware synthesizers, a
Mhm.
Roland and Innovation.
Cool.
Uh, so I'm using those for my synth work,
Mhm.
and uh, after the input signal from either of those synths, I have Ableton plugins, and I don't like. I think Kyle was saying instead of having decision paralysis, because I know I don't know so many things. I only have one compression plugin and
Mhm.
uh, one I think one compression, one reverb, and um I think one EQ. This is the
Mhm.
Fab Filter ones. That's it.
Good.
And everything else is me telling myself, try to maximize the output of whatever you have instead of going for a
Yes.
million plugins, which I don't understand, because
Yes.
that's just going to, uh, I'll unknowingly have too many blind spots. So I'm just keeping it very simple, but sort of
Right after my
focusing
own heart.
music. That's the, sorry?
That's excellent. Yes, I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah,
Yes.
because at the end of the day, I know I don't know so much, so I'm like, why not start with the absolute basics? And which is why I took the membership, to be very honest, in the first place.
Mhm.
But yeah, sorry if I took too much time.
No, not at all. This is a great conversation.
Excellent conversation.
All right, thank you so
Keep
much.
up the good work.
Yeah, thank you.
Hopefully, last but not the least, Kyle did mention that I should share my mixes at some point.
Yes.
And get feedback. I do remember that, so I promise I will get back to you at some point. I'm still, I'm like 90% done with the writing. Some tracks are more finished than the others, but yeah, I think at the end of the day, like you said, Gabe. Beyond a point, you commit to a sound, you commit to a certain moment in the track, and you move on. I came across a very good, I don't know, anonymous quote, if you will. It said, "Great art is never complete; it's just abandoned." So that has sort of been my mantra, if you will, of just sticking to that sound. Is it sounding good enough? Is it more or less conveying the emotion that I want to convey? If it's good, just move on. Otherwise, I will never finish what I'm trying to do, and I'm already doing way too many things.
I think that quote's great, but even more so, that makes me...
I saw it on the internet. I'm not sure who it is.
It makes me want to encourage you to not wait until your mix is complete, or don't wait until you're ready to abandon it either before submitting it for a mix review.
Right.
Right.
Because ideally you can come and with different iterations of your mix to mix reviews over the course of several months.
I see.
And we can help you as you go, right? Okay. So that it's not just necessarily, it's like a mix. It's not a complete mix review. It's a mix review, right? Gabe, how do you do that with your students? I know that in person it's challenging because there are so many people to get through. You've got maybe 25 students in a class. You've got 3 hours to...
I'm very fortunate. My program has we usually have no more than about 9 students in a class, so we do have time for everyone to present their work. In America, I use the same quote, but it's a little bit different. And I'm assuming this is an American translation issue of the American industry, right? The American record industry is saying mixes are never finished; they're just taken away from you. That's the way I've always known that.
That's
quote.
The corollary of what I was saying.
Yes. The business says it's not about you. You don't get to finish. It's not up to you when it's done. It's when I'm taking it away from you. You only have this much time, and that's it. Which is not how we make art. That's the consumeristic farce of it. No, like mix. The problem is that mixing is it's not a noun. It's a verb, and so we're doing it. And you can do it, and you can do it, and you can do it, and you can do it.
There's no end to it. Yeah.
Personal anecdote. I had an opportunity to work with this legendary engineer who's he's so amazing. This guy, and most people don't know his name, but he's worked on more records than I think anybody else in the industry. His name is Carl Richardson, and he was the staff engineer at the Hit Factory in Miami in the 70s. The late 60s into the 70s. Through the 80s, he did most of the Bee Gees catalog, and in addition to a lot of other stuff. But he and I worked on a record together where he was the producer and I was the engineer, and it was the greatest because after every night, he'd sit down and he'd be like, "All right, Gabe, what stories can I tell you? Who can I tell you about?" And some of the stories were just mind-bogglingly good. But one night after it had been about a week, so we'd gotten to know each other pretty well. He's like, "Can I play a mix for you?" And I was like, "Are you kidding me? Yeah, dude, let's fire it up." And he put on this mix of Staying Alive that...
Oh, nice.
I was like, dude, this record was done and it won all the... why are you still working on this? But he played it for me. And I lost my shit. I couldn't sleep for 2 weeks. It was just the most amazing mix I've ever heard. Way better than I thought possible. And it was just he's like, why should I have finished just because I turned it in and we won all those awards. It just made me want to work on it more. I knew there was something I could make better and better and better. And finally, this is me 35 years later, still plugging away at this mix. And holy shit. I mean, you'll have to take my word for it. But holy crap, was it better than what you know. I mean...
Than the mix that was published, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
They should re-release his mix, but they won't because they'd have to set up a whole new legal battle with new masters and everything. They have to pay him again. But even at the top, the best engineers keep working on things. They're just because they're not done. You're until you're done. It's not done. The art, the work, that's what it is.
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
I guess thank you so much.
Great question.
No other questions from my side for now.